All right, let's go and get some people in here. Give them a few seconds to clock in because it's 3 o'clock. All right, welcome Houdini fans. My name is Chris, and this is another episode of Houdini Secrets Live. Now, you guys all know that the reason why you're tuning in to check this out is to see some really groovy Houdini stuff that you can't find anywhere. And I promise to deliver, and I promise to deliver with this episode as well. However, with this episode may not be exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking for a tutorial to go over step by step by step, this episode isn't going to get it to you. But I do promise I spent more time preparing for this little presentation than I have with any of my other Houdini Secrets presentations. This one took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it took a lot of going through and for very little visual show. But I will promise you that if you are into creating things such as procedural buildings, using asset packs, this is definitely a lecture you're definitely going to want to see because it pertains exactly what you want and will help you along the way. So if you give me just a few moments of your time, and suspend your moments of disbelief, I will go over the things and show you what is going to happen in the weeks to come. All right, so let's get things going. Now, if you remember last week, we started going over, let's see, where's my little me? No. Okay, good. There I am. Ha ha ha. Thought you would escape me all the way. But anyway, we've got some real interesting. So we last week we started working on procedural buildings, and we were working with the Houdini SideFX Labs procedural building creator. Now that is a really cool tool, and hats off to the folks who created it. They really worked hard to put that sucker together, and they created something that's very good and very functional. However, I also received a request saying, okay, how do I use Houdini to go and get asset packs from the environment or from the asset store, take them into Houdini, let Houdini do its magic stuff, and then I have an instant level inside of my game engine. Okay, well, I'm afraid to tell you that it's just that is a little bit of something and a little bit challenging to create because when you're creating procedural buildings and so forth, procedural generation is not, and I'll get this, it's not. You can't download modules from the asset store and then plug them into Houdini without, just as is and end up with a model or blueprint or a prefab that just drops right in. I'm afraid that just isn't going to happen that way. Regretfully, it just doesn't work that way, and I'm sorry, but there will be some data massaging required. Now, what do I mean by data massaging? Well, that means that in order to use it in Houdini, you might have to scale it, or you might have to take an element from an asset pack and then you might have to do something with it. The folks who created those asset packs don't necessarily create asset packs to help you. Literally, they do it to help themselves and to make beautiful looking assets. Now, let's suppose you need a wall, for example, that has a basic structure of a 4:1 ratio footprint. It's 4 wide and then 1 deep. All right, cool. But suppose you would say, okay, I can create things that's 4:1, or maybe 2:1. That means it's half as long and just as deep, so that you can hook up to each other. And then maybe you might be able to create angles with them. However, the folks who created those asset packs and those modules didn't think with that in mind, and they created something that might be 2.5 wide by 5 wide by 1.5 deep. And then you realize that, okay, if you were just going into your engine generator and just dropping down pieces, then you could probably construct something that looks pretty good. However, we're going to do things with procedurally. And when you're doing things procedurally, you need to have something with a little bit of rhyme and a little bit of reason to it. And I'm going to explain to you in this lecture here what it is you need to do in order to get things working. Now, I'm also going to be referencing some very, very awesome tutorials that I myself didn't have time to create, but literally there is hundreds of hours of really awesome stuff in here. And I would encourage that if you are into creating procedural environments using a procedural package such as a Houdini, that you will definitely benefit from this. Now, it doesn't matter where you're going to be going into UE4 or Unity. Admittedly, my UE4 skills are greater than my Unity skills at the moment. However, I believe that from what I know, these will work. So let me go ahead and explain all of the topics you're going to deal with. Now, there are 3 basic procedural building strategies to use with the game engine. Now, the first one we introduced last week, and I call it the modular blocks strategy. Now, SideFX building generator, the SideFX Labs, the building generator is an awesome tool. You just have one central node, and then you just drop in, okay, I want this to be the front facade. I want this to be the top. I want this to be the bottom side. These are my right and the left side. Okay, these are the corners. Great, very good, very easy. However, there are some limitations with that, and we'll go into those. But the modular building blocks were very cool. And here is a link to a tutorial that kind of goes over the basic fundamental uses. And this is a good tutorial that kind of gives some hints on how to use things with the basic fundamental building blocks. Now, I would highly encourage anyone who's interested in procedural modeling, procedural level building, and procedural environments to check out this guy's stuff. I'm going to abuse his name, so I apologize, Simon. But Simon Verstrate, I think that's how you pronounce his name. But Simon is got some really good quality stuff out here and some really awesome stuff. Now, he created a tutorial on how to create using the building block generator using SideFX Labs, just building tools, and it's a really awesome tutorial. Okay, but there's a problem with this, and regretfully, it's the pros and cons of using the building blocks or the building generator is that it's relatively easy. But the problem is that it works only in Houdini, and which is good. It works in Houdini, but you've got to export the entire product out to UE4. And everything will transfer over to UE4 or your game engine if you create your materials properly in Houdini. Now, there's the big caveat. You've got to create your materials properly in Houdini so that they convert easily to game engine. And that gets me over into the cons. It says when working with these modules, you need to understand the exact dimensions before. So that means is that your modules have got to be locked. And what I mean by locked is that once you've created the modules, you have to understand their dimensions. And if your overall building dimensions do not work properly or scale properly with your individual modules, you're going to be stuck with a lot of empty space where there's not a lot of content, or you're going to end up with holes in your buildings. Now, this can be kind of challenging, and so that's why you need to do a little bit of planning ahead of time in order to actually structure your buildings so that they can use the modules in a nice procedural mathematical formula. And we mentioned this earlier, is that it only works in Houdini. And this isn't going to work with Houdini Engine. Now, I tried, like I said, I did a lot of work for this. I tried to get the building generator into Houdini. If somebody has actually succeeded in getting the building generator to work in Houdini Engine, please tell me. I would love to hear about it. Answer your comments, write me an email, do whatever you can. Show me. I'd love to know what I was doing wrong, but I couldn't get Houdini Engine to work with the building generator. And so that means is that you need to get whatever modules you downloaded from the asset store. You need to convert the geometries over to Houdini, which is not really such a bad thing because usually it reads in FBX or even OBJ real easily. But you need to manipulate and convert the materials over so you can see what you're going to look like. And then again, you have to convert everything back over to your game engine format in order to get the final product. And now what you're doing is translating your modules to Houdini and then translating your end product back to game engine. Now that can be kind of a cumbersome workflow. Not impossible, especially to the resourceful artist, but kind of cumbersome. And so I listed that as a con. All right. Now here is an alternative technique that I call the point instance. Now the point instance is a little bit of a compromise. Now, if you check out some of the work created by Ricardo Ponce, I believe that's how his name goes. I'm going to play his video here. Oops, we don't want to hear his video. We always want to play his video. He's going to show how to create his stuff in there. Now, his stuff is some very, very good looking material, and he presented his strategy inside of a tutorial that I'm going to list right here. Now, this is a very good tutorial. It's not too complicated, but it does go into a little bit of Vex, and so you will have to do a little bit of the old programming on it, but not again too bad. Once again, check out Simon Verstrate. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Hey, please, Simon, if it's tell me how to pronounce your name. But anyway, his stuff is really, really awesome. Let me get some of his stuff playing. He created some stuff here, and he came up with this tutorial called the Houdini House Generator that I went
Hello
through.
and welcome to the tutorial of...
There it is. And his stuff is really good. Now, he uses some of the L system footprint layer stuff that Ricardo Ponce created in order to generate his footprints, and it's a very, very cool process. It's a little involved, uses a little bit of Vex, but it works really, really well. Oh yeah, let me get here. There is a link to his tutorial. Now, both of these tutorials take about a half hour or so to go through. Now, if you were actually going to follow through, it would take you much longer than that to actually implement these things. But the content that they're providing is really solid and very, very clever. I really like their strategies on this. So both of these are really good places to start if you want to use point instancing. Now you're probably going, well, what do you mean by point instancing? Well, what we mean is, oh, I forgot to create a slide on this. But point instancing is a technique where instead of bringing the modules into Houdini, you actually create a Houdini digital asset that instead of actually putting in a, let's say, a facade, a wall, a door, a window, what you do is you put a point in there. Now, just a point. That point is actually a placeholder. So then what you do is when you bring it in Engine, Houdini Engine will then go and transform that point into any instance of any object that you want. Let's suppose you have a rocking window module. You could drop that in on the point. If you have a great door asset, you could drop that exact same door asset. And you don't have to convert anything because you are using the native engine module and the native engine primitive to drop right in on that point. Now this is a brilliant technique because Houdini's finally going. He says, "Okay, cool. I don't care what you got in there. I'll give me what you got. I don't care because we're just going to give you the procedural building elements, and then we're going to let the game engine put all the stuff in there that we want and let the game engine deal with everything." So really what it's doing is creating placeholders for the game engine just to drop on all this stuff, and it works like stink. It's awesome. I love it. I'm looking so forward to playing around with this technique. But the pros and the cons of it is that the modules never have to leave the engine. That means that the modules and your primitives stay right in the context of the engine. So that means you don't have to massage the data any. And that means there are no material issues. The materials always work and your stuff looks wonderful because it's exactly what the artist created. You never have to change anything. It works with Houdini Engine. Working with Houdini Engine is so awesome because then you can bring Houdini Engine into your game, into your real-time engine, and then you can build your buildings in the context of the actual level itself. You don't ever have to wonder, oh, I hope this works, and then convert the thing over, bring it into the game engine and say, oh, that didn't work. Go back to Houdini, back and forth. No, you can actually work right inside the game engine, and you can model and create your buildings dynamically in the context of the game, in the context of your level. It is just so awesome. Okay, the cons of this technique, however, is that there's no customization. That means that the modules are what the modules are. That means you can't deviate them. You can't change them. Now, you could change things using the other technique that we showed earlier, the block level, because you're bringing it into Houdini and you're kind of mucking with it. But for this technique is you have to use what's in the game engine. So that doesn't mean that you can't go and then take modules, take them into Houdini, take them into Maya, take them into Blender, muck with them, change them around, and then bring them back into the game engine. It just means is that the game engine has these modules, whatever modules they are, and you can't change that. You have to use whatever is available into the game engine. And so that means if you want to use it in Houdini and you're developing your building a digital asset inside of Houdini and not inside of Houdini engine, that means you're going to have to create some proxies to visualize what your assets are going to actually look like. That's not terribly problematic because your proxies are going to just be boxes. Boxes, big boxes, little boxes, bounding boxes. That's all you really need. However, it is one extra step within the evolutionary process, and that might deter some people. Okay, now the third technique is pure procedural. Now, this is awesome and it's horrible at the same time. And okay, we're going to call our hero again, Simon. Simon has a great tutorial where he goes through and he creates some sci-fi buildings. And he shows how to create some sci-fi buildings. Now, these techniques are cool because it doesn't rely on asset packs. It doesn't rely on anything. Everything is created purely procedurally within the context of Houdini. This doesn't mean that you can't use Houdini Engine, though, but what that means is that you're kind of stuck creating everything within the context of Houdini. So Simon's link to his sci-fi house can be found right here. Really, really good technique, especially if you want to go learn some really juicy, good, pure procedural techniques. This is an excellent tutorial to go through some of those techniques. Now, for those of you who are really up for an adventure, but you want the best looking procedural modeling in the world, in my humble opinion, go check out Anastasia Apara's stuff. Really awesome. Check out all this stuff. I'm going to fly by here. All of this stuff was created purely procedural within the context of Houdini. This was not created with asset packs. This was created purely procedural. And here's a link to Anastasia's website where she shows this off. but she does provide a tutorial that can be bought on Gumroad. And this tutorial is this is an elephant-sized mouthful. It is about 6 hours worth of explanation of this. These techniques are not trivial, and they will involve a lot of VEX programming. And if you've never had a chance to actually do some um, computational geometric operations, this will give you an exposure to it. But both of these situations go through some of those computational geometric operations and tell you how to do it. That's why I like both of these, all these videos that I provide. These videos that I'm showing you aren't going to be videos where you're going to say, what the hell is he doing and why are they doing it? The people who created these videos do a good job of explaining not only what they're doing, but why, which in my humble opinion is so important because the why is probably more important than the what. Okay, now when you go purely procedural, you also have the greatest amount of artistic freedom. You have the greatest amount of control, and you can have the greatest amount of change. Okay, but the problem with that is that you're going to have to generate all new assets and all new materials. So if you were hoping of using an asset pack or some pre-generated material with something that is purely procedural, it's not going to happen. It ain't going to happen. You're going to have to use some kind of other concept. But it all depends on the context of the situation of which you're working and the kind of artist that you are. So I'm not going to tell anyone how to do anything in particular. A lot of this depends on what you are, who you are, and what you like. Okay, so I created this comparison, this chart, in order to show, okay, what are all the pros, what are all the cons of all these various techniques and so forth, and what can you do to things. So I'm going to let you folks go ahead and decide what kind of techniques you would like to explore on this, because none of these techniques I can teach within a half hour. These are all some really juicy techniques. And if I was to show you all of these techniques in here, this would probably take close to 20 hours. And I think that we have a lot of stuff if you really want me to spend 20 hours going over this stuff with you, we can do that. But I think our time showing some unique Houdini material that you're not going to find anywhere is probably more important. Okay, so when dealing with, you've got your point instance technique, your modular blocks, which is using SideFX Labs, and your purely procedural. You've got those three techniques. Now, when you're looking at the first category of math and or program free, that means probably involving VEX or maybe involving Python. Okay, modular blocks will give that to you. You do not have to do any kind of math and programming other than figuring out, okay, let's see, my building has to be 200 units wide and every one of my modules is 50 units. So therefore I can get 4 of my modules inside each wall of that. That's about all the math that's going to be necessary. So point instancing and pure procedural, yep. You're going to have to do a little bit of math, and you're going to have to do a little bit of programming in VEX and possibly Python. Now, if you go and do Anastasia Apara stuff, you're going to do a lot of VEX, but that's where the purely procedural power is. And honestly, if somebody really wants to become a procedural expert, then I would highly suggest learning VEX. I created a VEX lecture a couple months ago. Feel free to look at that, and if you want more explanation, please contact me. I'll be happy to explain it to you. Okay, let's look at for pre-generated modules. What techniques are good for pre-generated modules? Now, the point instancing works awesome with pre-generated modules. It works really cool. Now, the modular blocks, that works really good too. You know, both of those techniques, you can take a pre-generated module and you can really go to town and just start layering on them, and they're really awesome. Okay, the pure procedural, No, sorry, it ain't gonna work. You're just not gonna work. It's not gonna provide what you want. You're gonna have to create your own custom-made pre-generated modules. Okay, then we are mentioned that the Houdini is not the same renderer as your game engine. So therefore, you're gonna have to import the geometry into Houdini. Now for point instancing, you might have to. It depends, and that really is all about creating the proxies. So that means you're probably going to have to create some proxy geometry to kind of give the overall shape and format of your modules and bring those into Houdini. Now, the purely procedural, I don't know. I can't really tell the purely procedural. I have no idea what you're going to work with, or if you're going to be duplicating assets, you're going to be duplicating modules. I don't know. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. It's hard to tell. But modular blocks, yeah, you're going to have to import the geometry into Houdini, and you're probably going to have to monkey with. Yep, you're going to have to probably not only bring the geometry in, but you're probably going to have to do some remodeling. Pretty much guaranteed, in order to get it to work just right with the SideFX Labs building generator. So what are then about the materials? We already mentioned that kind of bringing it into Houdini and using the Houdini material editor is a little bit cumbersome. Once again, the point instancing and the purely procedural is, yeah, the point instancing, well, if you want to see what it's going to give an indication of what it's going to look like in engine, and you just want to use those textures on side of your proxy objects, yeah, you can do that, but that means you're going to have to create brand new materials in order to put onto your proxies. And once again, your purely procedural is I have no idea what you can write. Your modular blocks, yep, definitely you're going to have to do because, or at least for the point instancing, it's optional. Your modular blocks is you've got to do it because we can't use Houdini engine. That means everything has to be created in Houdini. It has to be translated into Houdini-ness. You got to create materials for them so that you can set them up right so that when you finally export into the game engine, everything just kind of drops in. Okay, what about custom modules? That means customizing your own modules. We were working with pre-generated modules. What about customizing modules? Now, modular blocks works great with that. That means you can go and monkey with your modules and you can monkey with your stuff all day long. You can change things however you want. You can doctor them and change them in the context, whatever you need. Purely procedural? I don't know. Once again, I don't know what you're going to be doing with the purely procedural stuff. So it could take on any kind of format that you want and need. It might need some customization. It may not. I don't even know if you're going to use some. Okay, what about point instancing? Nope. You can't customize your module. And the reason for that is because it's dependent on Houdini Engine. And once you get it into Houdini Engine isn't going to even consider your modules until it actually takes them into engine and it says, okay, custom modules, we're going to use your geometry. We're going to use your material. We're not going to put any logic into that. We're just going to create a bunch of points and you're going to put those points wherever you want. That's awesome. And it's horrible at the same time because that means you can't doctor anything. That means if you want custom modules, you're going to have to export those modules out of your game engine, put them in whatever your favorite modeling and or material editing packages are, reconfigure things, bring them back into engine, set up your materials inside of engine, and get things ready to go. So that means you're going to have to go through all of that. Once again, not work for the person that just wants to hit the make art button. It isn't going to happen. Okay, what about creating the materials in engine? The materials in engine, creating a material in UE4 is not the same as creating a material inside of Unity. It's not the same as creating it in Crytek, and it's certainly not like creating a material inside of Houdini. What are you going to do? Well, the point instancing, you don't have to worry about that. Remember, the Houdini engine takes care of all that for you. It's just that, okay, I'm not even going to worry about the material and the geometry. I'm going to let the game engine deal with all of that. So you don't have to worry about that, which is really kind of cool. Modular blocks and purely procedural is, yep. Guess what? That means you're going to have to create brand new materials for all of your objects, bringing them back into game. Hopefully you don't mind doing all this because you're going to end up with some great looking art. But regretfully, you're going to have to recreate those new materials. So what about Houdini Engine? You know, we mentioned that before. Houdini Engine can really help speed things up. Okay, point instancing and purely procedural do give you access to Houdini Engine. Houdini Engine, just as a repetition so it will beat into you, is really awesome. And it's awesome because you get to work and build your assets inside the context of your level, of your environment. So that means you don't have to take things out of your game engine in order to work on them. You remain inside of the game engine and you work on your assets and you create the asset that is needed at that moment in time. Really cool stuff. Modular blocks, no. Regretfully, if you want to work in context of your environment, you're going to have to export your environment from Game Engine and bring it into Houdini as proxy geometry or export it as an FBX or bring the whole darn thing in there. And then you're going to have to model your modular blocks building in order to fit in there. And then once you're finished, then you can go and export the whole thing over again from Houdini into the scene. And it's an extra step, and it would just be much easier to just stay within Engine. Now, what about artistic liberty? Yep, you guessed it. Purely procedural is going to win in that category, and it is the tops. You have the greatest amount of freedom, you have the greatest amount of control, and you're not limited by anything other than your creativity and probably your math and your programming skills. Yeah, okay, point instancing and modular blocks, you're going to have to sacrifice something. You're gaining a lot of freedom, or you're gaining a lot of possibility because your point instancing and your modular blocks come as close to pressing the button and making art as possible. And with that kind of freedom, you're going to have to sacrifice something, and that sacrifice is your full artistic liberty. So here's the chart, gang. Now here's how this stuff all works. And as you can see, it is a regular tic-tac-toe of angel faces and devil eyes and neutral faces. And which one's best? Well, there is no best. What is best is that you, as an artist, you know how to work and you know what is necessary in order to actually get the results that you need. Use this chart as a way of indicating what kind of strategies you need. Okay, now next week, what we're going to be talking about is how to export assets out of Houdini and into UE4. I'm not going to go and show it how to do it into Unity because I can get a hold of the UE4 assets and I'm ready to go with that. And we're going to show how to export the objects and get the objects in there. We're going to have to show you how to, what's most important is how to do the instancing correctly. Ooh, let me go back to here. Now with a point instancing, you got to understand how instancing works. Now instancing is a really, really powerful tool, but you do have to make some modifications to your overall procedural structure in order to get that in. And I will go over that next week as well to show you how to do all the instancing. Got to show you how to do all the materials. The materials going into Game Engine can be cumbersome and they can be a pain in the ass. I'm not going to deny it to anybody. And if you're in a real hard crunch, sometimes you don't want to have to deal with it. But I'm going to go and show you how to drop the materials in with the least amount of pain. And I'm going to show you how to do it with Houdini Engine, and I'm going to show you how to do it without Houdini Engine. If somebody knows of a great way of doing it without Houdini Engine, please inform me, because I had to invent some of my own strategies and techniques of getting assets into Engine without using Houdini Engine. Houdini Engine is a product that you're going to have to pay for. And I know a lot of you folks are working with the apprentice license of this, and you say, man, I don't want to have to pay X amount of money just to experiment around in this. Okay, I'm going to show you how to get your materials from Houdini into into UE4 without using Houdini Engine with the least amount of pain possible. Now there is a little bit amount of programming, but I'm going to see if I can provide the programming for you. I've already done the work. I've already seen that it can be done, and it is pretty cool, but it requires a little bit of attention if you know what you're doing. All right, now that kind of pretty much goes over what I wanted to discuss today. This is what we're going to be discussing next week, is really all about how to export out of Houdini into Game Engine with the least amount of pain possible and get things going as quickly and as easy as possible. Because frankly, the greatest amount of the faster and the easier it is, the more iterations you have. The more iterations you have, the better your final product is going to be. It's that simple. Your quality of your product is directly proportional to the number of iterations you do. You get faster iterations, you get more iterations, then you're going to end up with something awesome. Okay, now that is what I wanted to discuss with today. I hope that you find this information very useful. If any of these techniques are, look awesome to you, go ahead and explore them. There's some, like I said, the tutorials that I pointed to today, they will take a little bit of effort. You're going to have to probably spend an hour to 2 hours going through each one of these. Some of you're going to take even much longer than that. However, the skills that you're going to get by going through these tutorials are really awesome. They're really going to help you with your overall procedural modeling career and your tool belt. There's some really awesome techniques. Check it out. Now, if you liked what you saw today, go ahead and subscribe to my video channel. That's Chris Rhoda. And then if you want to check me out on Facebook, check out Chris Rhoda at Facebook, or check out the Houdini users group for Orlando, Florida. We've got a web page on there in Facebook. Check us out there as well. And or check me out on LinkedIn. That's Chris Rhoda on LinkedIn. And check out at TechArt EDU, Chris Rhoda, for an update for all these Houdini lessons, as well as all things technical art. Thank you again for all of your support this week. Thank you again for allowing me to share my research with you. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week for Houdini Secrets. Have a great week.